Yeah, I have slides. So let me just share my screen real quick. Let me do presentation mode. Okay. Oh, just a second, guys.
No problem.
Yep.
Folks, just one point to add before we get started. Folks, please keep dropping your questions in the chat section. Priyal from my team will be curating these questions and and addressing them one by one. Please do keep this. This is an open session, so we generally have all of our sessions being quite interactive. So it'll be great if you have like more questions dropped in. We'll take time to answer them. No problem about it. And I'm pretty sure Anirudh will have strategic pauses to answer these questions, or we will pick all of them together towards the end. So either way, keep dropping in your questions in the chat, and we'll keep answering them one by one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Kushal. So folks, let me just quickly introduce myself. Firstly, thanks, Kushal, for having me on this. Also, I appreciate you kind of being an early riser and having this session for us. So I'm currently the Associate Director of Product at Yellow AI, and just a one-line summary of what Yellow AI does. We are in the customer experience automation industry. So you can call it chatbots, ticketing, all sorts of stuff around that. In terms of my journey over the past couple of years, right? My career, I did my BE in electronics, and then moved to the US to do my master's. And then I had a couple of analyst roles in the US where I worked in the angel investment domain. I worked a little bit with our business schools over there as an analyst, just doing a bunch of very interesting things. But then I moved back to Bangalore in 2017 and basically had that entrepreneurial bug to kind of do something. And then kind of, worked as an entrepreneur for about 2 years, and then that kind of didn't work out. And then moved into Yellow AI as a PM. So I've been a PM in Yellow AI for the past 4 years. And just a couple of interesting things. I've worked on very diverse set of projects along in my LinkedIn for a lot of time. It said, guy who's worked on diapers to satellites, everything around that. And personally, for me, the entrepreneurial journey was very interesting, more so because it gave me a glimpse of what I like to do, and more importantly, what I don't like to do. What I realized very early on in that, not very early on, towards the end actually of that entrepreneurial journey, is that I like doing the product work, but being an entrepreneur is a very, very different kind of skill set, and probably that's not what I want to do, right? I like to work a little bit under a very structured sort of environment, but still have that sort of flexibility to do things, have that sort of creativity, right? But that did give me like an immense amount of respect for people who are going through the entrepreneurial journey, because you need the different sort of grit for that, right? But one more thing that I really like doing is working at startups. I find it very invigorating because there's a lot of hustle mindset around it. You get to work on a lot of different interesting things. When I joined Yellow early on, I joined as PM number 2 actually. And I was doing all sorts of things, right from sales to solutioning to product work. It's very, very interesting. And last thing that I kind of want to mention about the way I kind of think is I think from a very first principles perspective, and hopefully throughout this presentation over the next 45 minutes, you kind of get a very first principles kind of mindset on how you should be thinking about the next generation of products, right? Especially because of generative AI. And I just want to add one more thing before we deep dive into it. The point of this presentation is not to kind of go and say, this is how you do prompt engineering, and this is how you do this, and this is how you do that. There's a lot of material out there on the internet where you can go and do much better deep dives than what I can do in 45 minutes. Rather, my goal is to basically tell you what are the paths available and then so that you have a mental map of how to go about this industry and how to think through it, right? Because after that, you can just Google things and deep dive into whatever area you find interesting and get a lot more details, right? So I'm here to just show you the map, not really go and point you, through that map itself, right? I'm just here to kind of paint the picture. Okay, so that being said, what are we going to do today, right? What are we going to learn? 4 main sections. I think one, and these are all questions, right? What's changed in AI over the last few months, and more importantly, is it hype, right? Second, we'll kind of deep dive into understanding what is really different when it comes to AI product development versus traditional product development. Third, and I think this is going to be the most interesting thing, is how are folks in the industry reimagining products and features with modern AI? And lastly, where's everything headed, right? What's the future of AI? And as product managers or people who are going to go into the product domain, what roles will we end up playing, right? So that being said, let's get into the first section, which is what's been happening over the last few months, right? And I think I really don't have to, get into details over here because everyone knows. But there's been tremendous activity in the industry when it comes to large language models, right? Everyone is basically working on something to do with it, or planning to work on something like that, right? Amazon's released this 20 billion parameter model. ChatGPT came out back, I think this was in, when was it? I think November of last year. Then Google released this Palm 2 next generation large language model. Microsoft goes ahead and buys, I think, 49% stake in OpenAI. GPT-4 came out early on this year, which is the most advanced system that's in terms of AI ever built, right? But this is not actually new. If you kind of go back a little bit ahead, backwards in time, the trajectory is obvious, right? Since 2000, I think 22, right? There's been an absolute explosion in the number of large language models built by large players or even open source folks like Eleuther and others, right? Basically, the path is clear, right? This is only going to increase over time, right? But I think what I find the most fascinating is the way that we are measuring some of these large language models, right? Earlier, there were different ways of measuring, but this is just a screenshot from the OpenAI website, by the way, right? And look at how these guys are now measuring how good GPT-5 is doing, right? I mean, look at these. These are exams. These are tasks meant for humans, right? We're not talking about translation and this, that, and all that right now, right? They are measuring how good these models are on GRE, LSAT, SAT, AP, right? These are all high school exams or even graduate level exams, right? And look at these scores. I mean, this is well above average, right? This is a 99th percentile in GRE, right? I took the GRE and I think I scored a little bit less, actually, to be honest. So great, GPT-4 is better than me at GRE, right? So this is phenomenal, right? Because now we are basically starting to think of these things as sort of scalable decision makers or scalable content generators, which are almost, in some cases, actually better than human performance, right? This is phenomenal if you start thinking of it this way. But fundamentally, as product managers, of course, right? Let's say you're at a company and you find this fascinating, and you want to go and tell your CEO that this is where we should put 25 engineers in. Before you do that, obviously, you should ask yourself questions to understand whether this is all hype or is it here to stay, right? This is a fundamental question that almost every PM should really be asking themselves. So what we can do right now is kind of take a step back and look at some of the other technologies that have come up in the past, right? All of you know about blockchain, cryptocurrency back in 2018, 2019, 2020. Crazy, right? Suddenly came out of nowhere. Everyone wanted to be like a blockchain Web3 company. Bitcoin price skyrocketed. I think this was, 2021, 2022 early, it just went bonkers, right? This is my most favorite slide. This is a company called Long Island Iced Tea. that basically renamed their company to Long Blockchain Corporation. This is an IST company, by the way, and their stock just skyrocketed the next day by 200%, right? This is like, if you guys know about the tulip mania in Netherlands, I think way back in the day, this is just that in reality, right? And then all of you know about metaverse. Facebook goes ahead, changes their entire company to Meta. What happened to Meta? I mean, what happened to metaverse, right? So a lot of these things, right? This has happened in the past, right? Where tech has come, generated insane amount of hype, and then it's kind of seemingly died down, actually, right? I think metaverse, Facebook actually shut down their metaverse, is what I remember reading somewhere, right? So is it different this time, or is it the same? This is the question that we should be asking, right? Now, how do we think about this, right? One thing is, what's different right now, right? What is there something different? Well, one thing we know for a fact is that there is easier accessibility to this technology, right? And what I mean by that is, let's take cryptocurrency as one of the tech in the past, right? If you wanted to buy Bitcoin, you had to go through such tremendous amount of trouble. I went through it. You had to kind of go and do KYC, and then go to download the app, link your bank account, and there's a bunch of things, right? And then even after you bought Bitcoin, what do you do with it, right? Most people just bought it as an investment, sort of speculative investment, thinking that its price is just going to go up, but there's no real utility to it, right? And I remember a lot of apps try to say, you can use your Bitcoin to recharge your Airtel mobile phone and stuff, but who's going to do that? Why would they do that, right? But the difference right now is, with ChatGPT, it is so easy for you to go and try it. What do you need to do? Just go to chat.openai.com, go in, and you have access. Sign up for an account and you have access, right? You have access to the tech right away. For metaverse, let's say you wanted to try out how the metaverse was, you had to buy like a $2,000 pair of goggles, VR goggles, right? Very, very hard to basically even try out that tech, right? And the stats just show that, right? ChatGPT went to 1 million users in just 5 days, right? It just shows that the accessibility to this tech was so easy. And fundamentally, what that means is, because it was so easy for someone to go and try it, it is easy for them to understand the value proposition itself, right? What does it mean for me as a user, right? Maybe you wanted to quickly compose an email, so you went ahead and tried saying, hey, compose an email for me, right? And boom, right away you got a nice email. Maybe you're creating a resume and you just wanted some pointers over there on how to write a cover letter, right? Immediately you get it. And then you're like, this makes sense to me, right? This is useful. Why? Because you had access to that tech immediately, right? It's very easy for you as a user to understand the value prop because of how easy these guys made it to access the tech itself, right? And then what happens after that? Okay, you go and start talking about it, right? Like, oh my God, it was so easy for me to write this cover letter. And you go and talk to it to 2 more people about it, right? Those guys go and try it because it's so easy to try it out and access it, and it's free, right? And what happens? Those guys go and talk more about it, right? They start understanding the value, and this very nice sort of flywheel effect started going through. And this is the fundamental difference that's there right now, which was not there in the previous tech, because easy access and actual intrinsic value of the tech itself, right? People are able to understand how this is helping them in their daily lives. Why? Because they have easy access to it and they're able to try it out. So there is both parts of it. There is easy access as well as actual intrinsic value to it, right? And this is really the difference. And this is why I fundamentally believe that this is there to stay, other than, of course, the impact it's going to have on business and all those things, right? So the next question is, now that we understand that it's not really hype and it's here to stay, the next question is really how to think about and build these AI products that are at the center of it, right? Let me just pause here to see if there's any questions. This yellow AI leverage. Yeah, there's a question about yellow. I think I'll take that towards the end so that we don't block the flow over here. I hope that's okay. Great. So what I want to talk about now is, because it's a compare and contrast, right? It's how are things before? How do you generally go about traditional software development, traditional software product development when it comes? And see, this what's on my screen right now is generally the way you would think about a product, right? You have all these 4 risks that are involved. If I build this product, will customers find value in it? Will customers be able to use the product itself, the general usability thing? And then, like, is there a viable business here for me? And then, of course, the main fundamental feasibility question, right? Can we actually build such a product? These are the 4 general risks when you think about building a new product, right? Now, when you're incorporating AI in it, right? And this, I'm talking about the traditional AI systems, not large language models. We are not going there yet, right? Traditionally, when you went and built AI, this is pre-ChatGPT, there was another 5th risk involved, which we can call it model risk, right? And what I mean by model risk is basically another set of questions that exist just because you want to use AI as part of it. And again, I'm just saying that this is before the ChatGPT business, right? This is how traditionally people looked at AI earlier, which is, can I even build a model that can satisfy these requirements, whatever the business requirements, right? And when I used to go to our ML team and ask these questions, the first thing they would do is try to pull data to build such a model, right? And that would take like a month, 2 months. They have to build the pipelines, get all the data to even sit and train an ML model, right? There's a whole discovery process that happens. But then you start having questions saying, hey, if I build this model, will it even be able to do this task? It's not about can we build it, it's about if we build it, will it be able to perform at an adequate level, right? If it's not going to work, then what do we need to do about it, right? Do I need to get more data? Do I need to basically do XYZ, whatever else it might be, right? How can I improve it? Then there's the entire process of how much time is it going to take me to build these models itself, right? Is it going to take me 2 months, 3 months? God knows how long, right? It's generally a very large process. Then, okay, great, I've put in production. Now, how do I improve it over here? Because right now it's only 60% accurate. A lot of such questions, right? And, there's other questions as well. For example, let's say you are building a model for, just hypothetically, right? Like a loan approval process. What happens if if I approve a wrong loan? What are the business implications of such a thing, right? How do I balance this risk? There's a lot of questions around just the model part itself. So in general, earlier, as soon as you say, you know what, we should probably use AI to solve this problem, immediately you're adding a bunch of more uncertainty to deal with, right? Okay, so 1 second. Yeah. So what changes now, right? Now we've got these large language models like GPT-4. What are the differences? Great. Firstly, you don't really need to build a model from scratch anymore, right? You don't need to do it. You've got a very powerful tool with just a few, adjustments. You're able to really get something off the shelf without really investing that much into building a team and stuff. Do you have to worry about whether it can perform at an adequate level or not? It's not really necessary because you can try it out yourself. You don't need to forecast and think about it, right? You have the ability to just go to chat.openai.com or platform.openai.com, write a nice prompt, whatever you want it to do, and then just see for yourself whether it can perform at an adequate level or not, right? Trust me, guys, this was not possible earlier, right? You had to go through an entire data science, machine learning loop to even reach this level where you can see whether something is possible to do or not, right? Do you really need to get a whole bunch of data to try this out? Nope, not needed. Just write a nice prompt, iterate over that prompt, right? How much time will it take to build these models? Nothing. You just go there, write a good prompt again, and instantly you have the API available to integrate it if that prompt is working very nicely. Of course, the question of how do we improve it and what are the business implications of getting a prediction wrong still exists, right? So these are 2 questions anyway that are more strategic in nature, which you'll have to think about when you're building such a product, right? How do I improve this? How do I use a feedback loop within my product to improve it? And of course, what if the model doesn't work very well? What business implication does it have? And what are the risks associated with it, right? These are general PM questions that anyway you will have to do. But the main point to stress over here is that the discovery process of can it work is significantly faster and easier because of LLMs like GPT-4, Anthropic, Llama 2, whatever else it might be, right? And as PMs, what this means for us is that now you can get MVPs out super fast, right? You can get these things out really, really, really fast. Okay. And to me, like one of the most important things, like if there was a single takeaway from this, right? It's that with prompt engineering, a PM with knowledge of just the English language and just a little bit of curiosity and inquisitiveness, right, can build MVPs with zero understanding of ML. You don't need to know anything, right? As long as you know what is the business kind of outcome that you want to drive, and you're kind of curious about how these systems work together, and you're good at writing prompts, you can basically go ahead and build like really, really cool MVPs, right? Without really understanding what any bit of ML. And this is incredibly powerful and a very 0 to 1 change in the PM world, if you think about it, right? Earlier, you would have to know a lot of machine learning to basically even get off the shelf. Cool. So now, I think now that you understand the differences, now that you know it's not hype, now the next question is really, what are the sort of questions that we should ask? How do I even go about thinking about it, right? Like, when should I use a large language model? Where should I use a large language model within a product that I'm building, right? Are there some principles to kind of think through over here, like from a design thinking kind of point of view? Well, to answer that question, obviously, first we need to understand what large language models are good at. What is it fundamentally that these things are good at, right? Because if I know that, if I know what this tool is good at, then I know where I can go and hammer it, right? Understanding what the scope of the tool is very important before you understand where you can add it into your product. That's basic logic, right? Okay, so let's think through over here. Well, there are three main things, according to me. This is my opinion, and we can, of course, talk more about it. But one is that the content and response generation bit, right? We'll deep dive into each of these things, by the way. Second is finding content and navigation. And the third, I think the most interesting thing is the decision-making capability, right? So let's dive into each one of these individually. Well, I'm just doing a quick time check. Okay. Great. Okay, so the first one, right, is content and response generation. Now, this is, I think, the thing that's most obvious to a lot of you who have used ChatGPT. You just go and say, hey, I need a blog for this. I need to write a cover letter for this, and you get a very nice kind of, good first draft, you can think of it, of whatever you want, right? Large language models, especially the ones like GPT-4 and GPT 3.5 and Claude 2, are very, very good content generation machines. But how do we think about this, right? Well, one way is that if your user, the product that you're building, if your user is doing something very repetitive in their workflow, right? For example, let's take content marketers, right? They have to write a lot of blogs, or any sort of marketing folks, right? They have to write a lot of blogs, or they might have to write a lot of ad copy, or they might have to write a lot of copy in general, right? This is something that's very repetitive in their workflow, and especially because they're generally time constrained, right? This is a great place to kind of add a large language model, which basically is able to generate content based on whatever are the requirements from that particular user, right? So because it's something very repetitive that keeps happening in this user's workflow, obviously it makes sense to automate a part of it, right? The second, I find this very interesting, is because how many of you would have probably, wanted to write a blog, and then you open Google Docs, and then you stare at that empty page, and you just don't know where to start, right? Have you ever come across that? If it's yes, just say yes in the in the chat, right? But I personally have this problem a lot, because you just don't know where to start, right? And this is one of the places where a large language model makes a lot of sense, right? And you will start seeing this a lot in some of these note-taking apps. This might already be there in Notion and others, but idea is basically, hey, tell me what you're trying to do, right? Canva, for example, right? Just tell me what you are trying to do, and then write it in natural language, and then basically give me a first template, right? Instead of starting from a blank page, give me a template where I can start from, right? And if you think about it, and if any of you have actually used Canva, they have a marketplace of templates, right? Think about what these models are going to do to Canva's business now. And Canva, by the way, charges, I think, $1 or something for each of those small templates that they have, right? If content can be generated so easily and on demand, what does it mean for a business like Canva? Or what does it mean for a business like Shutterstock, right? Which sells stock clips and stock photos and so on and so forth, right? Just something to think about. And the other one is basically, doing divergent thinking. I think this is also pretty interesting, where you can basically go and start brainstorming with such a chat GPT, right? I do this a lot, where I just go and say, hey, what would the world kind of look like if this product existed, right? And then just kind of do collaborative thinking around it, right? So that's again a form of response generation itself. But if you kind of summarize this entire, principle, it's in general, you can use a language model if you want to basically speed up or increase the quality of a user's workflow, right, in your product. Okay, now just some examples. Copy.ai, Jasper, if you've ever used that, right, does the same thing, right? They basically help marketers to write blogs much faster, write high converting posts, add copy, emails, cold emails, all that good stuff, right? We've at Yellow AI also incorporated this principle within our product. So we build basically chatbots, right, where there are flows that you'll have to create for each bot. So what we do is we have this thing called AI CoPilot. You go click this button, and you basically just say, hey, I want the bot to do this, and then you hit create, and then boom, right, that entire thing just gets created, right? So we are basically incorporating this part and this one, right? We don't want to put the user into this blank page kind of problem. Okay, so moving into the second kind of principle or a theme, you can call it, which is finding content and navigation, right? So here, this is interesting because a lot of you would have, I don't know if there are any developers in the audience, but when you're writing code, if you're really stuck somewhere, right? What would you do? You'd basically Google around, Stack Overflow or wherever to kind of debug it, right? And the answer is there somewhere. It's just that you're finding it difficult to find that piece of content, right? Have any of you, after ChatGPT came out, I don't know how many of you have tried this, but have you gone to ChatGPT and just put your error message and kind of try to debug it that way? If yes, then just say yes in the chat box. I just wanted to experiment a lot with this, and I just started writing a bit of code. And the way you can debug by using ChatGPT, right, is phenomenal, right? You just go and you say, this is my problem, and then it just kind of goes ahead and fetches that answer. So anytime where there's a lot of content, and of late, you would have seen, I think just 2 days back, right, when the OpenAI Dev Day happened, they have now given you the capability to just go and upload documents right away, right? And basically, you could just find answers from any of those collection of documents, right? So anytime where there's a lot of knowledge repository and you want to basically help your users answer questions from on top of that, a language model is a great kind of tool for that, right? And another very interesting thing is, see, it doesn't have to be documents and knowledge itself, right? It can even just be a collection of products, right? Let's assume that you're an e-commerce store and you have like 1,000 different SKUs of products. And what you basically want to do is try and help the user find the best product for themselves, right? And if it was a physical store, what would happen is a salesperson would be the person trying to kind of recommend that, hey, this product probably makes sense for you, right? Or what are you looking for? Let's say you're at a Sangeeta or a mobile store, right? Where someone is basically, you walk in there and then the person would ask you, right, what kind of phone are you looking for? Android or iPhone? How much storage? What are you using it for? Photography? Are you using it for gaming? What is it, right? And they basically recommend such a product for you. Well, now with the language models, right, another way to think about it is, hey, can I use these for recommending products out of my large set of catalog of products that I have, right? And I'll show you one of those things. Conversational user interfaces, this is again a very interesting one, but if you take a step back, right, you can start thinking of these language models as a natural language interface on top of your source of data, right? I've talked to a lot of businesses where what they're doing is they've got a whole bunch of data in like an SQL table, and all they want to do is ask questions in normal English about how much was our revenue yesterday, how much did we make last quarter, right? Those kind of questions. And this makes the entire process a lot more easier because I can just type in normal English, right? So what's the takeaway here? It's that in general, help the user get what they want instead of making them find it, right? Why are you forcing your user to kind of go through 1,000 products while you can just ask them, what are you looking for, right? Using a large language model, now you have the ability to fetch that. And Myntra did this. If you remember, this is back in May of 2023. Where they launched this thing called My Fashion GPT as part of the Myntra app. And you could just go in natural language and say, I'm looking for wedding kurtas or whatever. And it just showed you a bunch of, kind of AI, I think. Let me just open that up here. Yeah, Mendable.ai. And these guys are doing something interesting. What they're doing is for developer docs and stuff, right? You could just use Mendable and then in the search bar itself, right? While you're typing, it helps answer questions over there. It's not a search bar anymore. It's more like a chatbot that opens and then you can ask questions right there on the developer docs itself, right? So it's Mendable.ai. Go check it out. Okay. Let me take a quick pause here and a time check. We're at 8:05. We have 25 minutes. And Akhil had a quick question. What are the use cases of CoPilot? Yeah. Yeah. So, see, I think, in my opinion, right, the CoPilot kind of thing, I'm assuming, are you talking about Yellow AI CoPilot or just CoPilot in general? Maybe you can clarify that. Okay, got it. So, so what we do is in the Yellow AI CoPilot, right? What we are essentially doing is building the flows that are necessary for a bot, right? For example, let's say you're a PM at Swiggy, and you want to basically automate the order status kind of flow, right? And you don't want people to call your call center. Instead, you just want to handle it in the bot itself, right? What would you have to do? Maybe first you'll have to fetch that information from Swiggy's system of what are the active orders remaining, ask the user which one they're talking about, and then go and find the status for that, right? Hypothetically speaking. In a traditional kind of conversational AI system, and I'm not talking about Yellow AI over here, it could be any chatbot system, you have to basically build those flows from scratch. You have to say, hit an API first, and then show the responses, and then ask the user to select it, and then hit another API and stuff, right? It's a little bit time-consuming process. You have to learn the platform a lot, and it's not the most simple thing to do, right? So what we've done with Yellow AI Copilot is essentially, made this process significantly easier. All we ask the user is, hey, what do you want to do, right? And the user just comes and says, I want to build an order status flow where I ask the user for this, and then you hit create, and it just creates that entire flow, right? So this is just one of the places where we've used like an AI Copilot system. There are plans to kind of use it in a lot of different places. Yeah. So yeah, I remember you had another question as well. Does Yellow AI leverage OpenAI or Generative AI, or have you built proprietary? Curious to know if it makes sense to leverage APIs from $1 billion company. Yeah, this is a great question, man. I'm going to answer this towards the end because this is a fantastic question. Let me take that towards the end because I want to cover some parts of it and then it'll make more sense later, right? But I'll answer that question towards the end. What are some practices to keep in mind while setting up company operation contexts for Gen AI systems? I didn't quite understand that question. Maybe you can rephrase that while I move ahead and I'll take it towards the end. Okay, so yeah, so just coming back to our flow. So we talked about finding content and then, content, finding content, and then basically, what was the other one? Content, yeah, content generation, right? So the third kind of principle is basically, and this is the thing that I'm actually super, super excited about. The other two I feel are very, while they add value, they're just incremental value, right? 10, 20% additional user experience. This decision making is a whole new ball game altogether, right? And this is a report from 2022, actually. I just pulled this out way back earlier, in fact. And this talks about, instead of just, training these models with, content, would it make sense to give these models the capability to use tools, right? And what kind of tools? Search engines, calculations, Python interpreters, and all that sort of stuff, right? And if you basically teach these models to basically use these tools, then it becomes much easier for them to handle more complex operations, right? This was the hypothesis. And then a whole bunch of things happen. And look at the data around this. This is in April of 2023. AutoGPT came out. You might have used it, tried it, pretty crazy stuff. Baby AGI came out, where the entire idea was, autonomous agents, right? Where you just go and tell these systems, hey, I want to do X, and it figures out how to do X and goes to the internet, downloads content, does research on that content, and kind of summarizes it and gives it to you, right? So whole bunch of very interesting things. And then back, I think this is in July of this year, I think, OpenAI came up with this amazing kind of concept called function calling, where the idea was that, these models, GPT-4 and GPT-3.5, they just understand when it needs to use another tool, and then you can basically expose that tool as an API to GPT-3.5, right? And it would basically say, hey, now I want to, let's say you come and say, when's the last flight from Bangalore to Hyderabad tomorrow? It would say, I need to basically call a flight booking or a flight status or a flight catalog API. And then you basically go give that information to it, and then it synthesizes from there, right? Very, very interesting things. But the main concept over here is that these models have the capability where you can give, for example, a history of what the user has done, along with what the user is trying to do now. And it has the capability to basically understand and tell you what's the next best thing to do, right? And let me add one more point over here, and hopefully this starts making a little bit more sense, is that when you start adding third-party system data over here, right? A good example of this is, let's stick with the Swiggy example itself that I mentioned earlier, right? Let's say you got some burnt food or you got some stale food or whatever it is, you just go and reach out to customer support. What would a customer support agent do at that point in time? Well, first is they'll go and check your order history, kind of see whether you're like a loyal customer, and probably they'll ask you to upload some photos and stuff, right, to see whether these are legitimate concerns. And then they'll basically take a decision based on that, I should probably offer a refund over here. Now, this is a very simplistic scenario, and they actually have this in the app, right? They've kind of implemented this in a very rule-based manner. But if we try to extrapolate this a little bit, right? How can I kind of bring these sort of decision-making scenarios to more complex systems, right? I'll give you another example that we talk about a lot within Yellow, which is a hotel booking cancellation kind of scenario, right? Where ask the user, hey, why are you canceling a hotel booking that you made? Let's say it's a Make My Trip bot or whatever, right? Now, generally, there could be two scenarios over here, right? One is there's an unavoidable reason. My loved one passed away and I really need to, I can't make this trip, which is like an unavoidable reason, right? You really have to go. It's not like there's something you can do about it. But you might also go and say, hey, no, I got 30% off on booking.com, right? Now, in this scenario, what would Make My Trip want to do? They would want to try and retain you as a customer, right? And maybe they'd want to offer you 30% discount or match that particular offer, or give you some incentive, free breakfast, whatever, right? How do you codify these into rules? Right now, these would be support agents kind of taking these decisions manually, right? But how do you kind of bring in this sort of decision-making scenarios, right? You can do that now with these language models, right? You can write a nice prompt, which basically says, in this scenario, try to retain the user, and you can offer them up to a 30% discount. If it's an unavoidable reason, then just go ahead, right? And just inject it with all the data about that particular user, and it'll try to retain that user. Like, we've actually done this, right? This is the power of the large language models that are, if you start thinking about them as decision-making systems, right? And one thing I want to add over here is, like, if you're thinking about what's the most important thing in this scenario, it is basically how you bring in this third-party system data into a large language model, right? And I think this, I'll take that question that Akhil had posted earlier, which is related to this, right? I'll take that towards the end a little bit. But it also has the ability to handle a lot of these fuzzy requests. Let's say you go to Google Maps and you just say, I want to do something fun tomorrow, right? Well, fun could mean a lot of things. How do I know what is fun to you? But if, let's say, you built a feature on Google Maps where, the user can basically type out something like this, well, then Google Maps has data about you that, okay, you like to go to, let's say, movies a lot, right? And movies could be what you mean by fun. So when a user comes and says, I want to do something fun tomorrow, which is very fuzzy if you think about it, there is enough data on Google Maps to basically say, okay, this guy, fun to this person is basically movies, and therefore I should recommend movies to you, right? The large language models now have the capability to make that. And this, in fact, is the next frontier for AI. And it's not just me talking about it. It is basically the entire industry, right? You folks might have heard of, or if you've not, you should check out what the folks at Induced AI are doing. They are basically building AI workers, right? And what they've done is they've basically built this Chromium kind of browser where you can just go and just say, this is what I want to automate, and it just spawns up a Chromium browser and starts doing this 24/7, right? Fantastic stuff. This is really where the industry is headed towards. And this is not me saying, this is like a last-minute slide that I added just yesterday morning. In fact, Sam Altman literally went on stage and announced assistants and OpenAI agents, right? And the idea over there is, again, exactly what I just mentioned. You just give some instructions, you give it the capability to take actions, you give it some knowledge about what you want to do, and all these three things work together, and you start thinking about these large language models as decision makers, not just content machines, right? Again, let me do like a quick time check. Yeah, so I think I'll just quickly cover this part, and then we can head over to the last section and then questions, right? So one of the things that we did at Yellow, what we realized was that building a chatbot is a very kind of a painful process, and it's not really, that's kind of the standard in the industry. And customers wanted like a very quick and easy way to answer their users' question, right? And all they wanted was very simple, right? I am a business, I have some documents, I have my website. User comes and asks questions about, something about my website or my product. I just want a bot that can answer things, right? And we basically built a very quick solution around this, which would have been impossible to do before, like large language models, right? And you can go and try this over later. In the interest of time, I'll basically skip this a little bit. But you can head over to yellow.ai/yellowg. Just go over and put your website here and hit generate. And it'll just pop up a bot right there in front of you in like 5 seconds, right? And these kind of things were literally unimaginable before the advent of these large language models, right? You would not have even the opportunity to basically build, or you would require a tremendous amount of resources to build something like this, right? So just skipping ahead over here in the interest of time. But one of the things that we faced earlier was too much work to set it up, a lot of work to fix and expand, and the entire process itself of building a bot was very, very hard. Okay, so we'll just cover up this thing and then we can head over to any sort of questions that are there. But okay, what's the future of AI and what role will you play in it as a product manager, right? Yeah, so one of the things is that AI is obviously getting commoditized, right? There's no doubt about this. I think the fact that your product has AI in it will not really be a differentiator by any means. It's definitely not likely to be a moat, right? Everyone is kind of building AI, everything around AI, right? And I think this is, Akhil had a question around that, so I'll take that right now, which is, do we really leverage OpenAI or do we build proprietary language models? Because just using an API from someone like OpenAI, there's really no way we can kind of compete on top of that, right? So Akhil, to answer your question over here, this is like, it's obvious, right? A lot of this is getting commoditized. And I think the more important point is that people are starting going to be building on top of it, right? So if you've built a product which leverages OpenAI and then someone else leverages OpenAI, then what is really the differentiator that's there, right? This is the fundamental question that even we start thinking about, right? So over the short, I'll answer this question in 2 ways, right? One is, over the short term, there is an edge that you can get by leveraging your own proprietary large language models. And that's what we have done, right? So this yellow G thing that's over here. 1 second, this Zoom thing is coming on top of this. Yeah, so this yellow G thing that I mentioned, right? This actually uses our proprietary large language model. So we basically trained this on a Llama 2 7 billion model. And it's worked phenomenally well for us. We've been able to reduce hallucinations and all the things that an enterprise would generally want. But over time, probably that what would happen is, OpenAI, like you saw 2 days back, right? OpenAI is just going to come and drop the cost by 300-400%, and it's probably not going to make a lot of economical sense to go and position the product in such a way. So what I feel actually would start making sense over time, if you want to build like a proper differentiator with still leveraging APIs from OpenAI, is basically what I mentioned earlier, right? Which is building this context engine, right? Because today it could be OpenAI that's leading, tomorrow it could be Anthropic, whatever it is, but you don't want to be dependent on that API for your business, right? What is going to kind of create that moat for you is how you bring together all of the different systems that you have. For example, the Swiggy example that I gave is how you're taking customer data, how you're taking pictures that they've uploaded and probably their order history, and then combining it together and giving it to this language model to make a decision. That is going to be the core sort of differentiator or moat that you can build for your business, even though you're leveraging OpenAI, right? So I don't know if that answered your question. If it did, then great. Otherwise, you can just post a follow-up. Okay, so yes, fantastic. I think the other thing is, it's obvious in hindsight, but try and understand your users' workflows and pain points as much as possible, and start leveraging the AI component to make that easier. I've seen a lot of people do this where they just stuff AI in it just for the sake of it. That's not really going to help much. Sure, it might get some publicity points, but it's not really going to help you craft a better product. This is obvious, but you can use the framework that I mentioned earlier, the 3 principles, to kind of start thinking as a stencil, right? And I think this one is again probably obvious, which is kind of adding to Akhil's question, right? Which is, see, you're probably going to be playing on the application layer, right? You're going to be using some of these large language models or APIs, and you'll be building the UI on top of it. You'll be building the applications on top of it as a PM, right? And for you to do that, you'll have to really understand what are the weaknesses, what are the drawbacks of these systems, understand how to build like really good user experiences around them. How do I build feedback loops where if something is not working right now, I just use the user's feedback to make it better the next time. That is what you'll be doing as a PM, right? You'll not really be going into the weeds and saying what is the setting for this LLM and all that. It'll be on the top application kind of layer, right? And lastly, I think what I mentioned earlier as well. One of the greatest advantages that these modern AI tools have given you is the ability to really try things out at super high velocity, right? Iterate very, very fast, and this is really like an opportunity that's once in a lifetime. Go ahead, give it a shot, try writing different prompts, and see how you can really enhance the capabilities of your product. There's really nothing stopping you other than just going and logging in one of these tools. Yeah, I think that's it from my side. We can see if there's any questions. Yeah, I think there was one from Vinayak. I don't know if he's still here. Yeah, Vinayak is still here, right? Great. Yeah, there was one question around what are some good practices to keep in mind? Yeah.
Yeah, just give me a minute. So can I talk directly or do I need to type it out?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I was asking essentially is when you said, like you just mentioned in the decision-making slide as well, that your moat is your context and how you bring context. So personally, when I've experimented with some building MVPs around generative AI, the biggest issue I've faced is that whenever I'm trying, like if I'm, let us say, feeding it a data set to make a decision for me, I have to label a lot of these columns, which is natural to do. But even after labeling them properly, I'm seeing that the results are less than accurate and less than the required accuracy. And even let us say all the prompt engineering practices have been followed. If I change the question slightly, or if I ask the metric in a slightly different way, the system entirely breaks down and starts to hallucinate. So especially when you're building scalable products, what are, in your experience at LOA, what are some good practices to make sure that these things don't happen a lot?
Yeah. See, I think a lot of these are actually kind of experiments, right? And if you go through the dev day kind of talk that happened 2 days back, they're also trying to do a lot to kind of improve reproducibility and all that, right? They're bringing in the seed parameter and a bunch of things. So I think one thing is, I think when you mentioned the way you're using it, right? I don't know if I understood that correctly, but it looks like you're using it more like a few shot setting, right? Where you're saying this is X and this is Y, and then just try to follow these rules. While that does help, if you give a little bit more emphasis on the prompt itself, again, this is our experience, it might work, it might not work. If you're instead writing a very good prompt, rather than just relying on that few shot data that you have, we've seen a little bit more success. And by the way, when we have used GPT 3.4, 3.5, sorry, it's not that great. Let's put it like 4 is significantly better at this decision making than GPT 0.5. Good news is that 4 Turbo has just come out, which is significantly cheaper, and latency is all good. So we are just trying to see how to experiment. But in our experience, the 3.5 decision making has not been the best. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay. And yes, great, fantastic. Also, Anthropic Claude 2, you can experiment a little bit with that. That's also pretty good. Okay. There's one question here. Yeah, 3.5 turbo is not that great, man. Honestly. Yeah, there's one question here. Hi, for lending company. Any suggestions to use AI to make decisions on loan approval? If yes, how much approach with prompt? Okay. Yeah. Don't use large language models for like financial settings, because you want more explainability over there. Let's say a model, let's say you used, I did give an example earlier, but that was hypothetical. Let's say you are building like a large language model system for loan approval, like the Sujay's example here. It's not a great idea, because when you're building such systems, you want explainability, right? If the model took a decision saying yes, you should allow this person to apply for a loan, you want to go back and see why it made that decision, right? And that's for compliance and all those kind of things. Large language models like GPT-4 are utter black boxes. You have no idea why that particular decision was taken. Sure, you can do some things like chain of thought reasoning and all that, but you really don't have a lot of explainability around it, right? And that's kind of adding on to what Vinayak also had said earlier, which is that sometimes it just doesn't work. So what do you do when it doesn't work? How do you find out why it didn't work, right? These large language models have literally zero explainability. A lot of research going on around that field on how to improve that explainability. But for domains like fintech and others, where you really want to understand why a system has taken a decision for compliance and all that, you don't want to be using these things. And that's what we tell our customers as well, that if it's a place where you want very high amount of determinism, don't use like a language model around that. Okay. All right. Any questions? Let's stop sharing.
Cool. Folks, we still have a few minutes, so please keep dropping your questions until then. We still have, or we'll extend the session by a few minutes to answer any questions you might have. So yeah, please keep them coming. Thanks for all the feedback shared so far on the session. I totally agree. This is quite an insightful session overall.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and of course, folks who are listening in from or tuning in from LinkedIn Live, thanks for joining as well. Although happy to answer a few questions before we call it a day today. All right. If there are no further questions, then perhaps we can call it an end to today's session. Folks, thanks again for joining us today evening for PM School Star session. As you know, PM School is obviously one of the most foremost entities today, which is dedicated to help folks upskill to become product managers. So we have an 8-week live cohort program, which is going to kickstart next week. So we still have time in case you are interested to join us. It's a closed door, small group, very focused learning experience for 8 weeks, where we'll help you upskill for the right skills required to crack your first product manager job. And of course, we are there through the journey, post that as well with the PM School community, which is a closed door community on Slack, where you have access to experts like Anirudh, who will be around to talk about specific topics and we help each other out in your journey as product managers. So please do check it out. PL is going to share all the details over email anyway. Otherwise, it's pmschool.io in case you want to directly apply on the website. So Anirudh, once again, thanks for taking the time out. Totally appreciate you being here today. It was a wonderful session, a lot of takeaways, and we hope to see you very soon as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kushal. I mean, thanks a lot for what you're doing for the PM community as well, right? Always appreciate it's a very close-knit community. So yeah, thanks a lot for everything that you folks are doing.
Our pleasure to have you. Thanks so much for joining. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the evening. I'll talk to you guys very soon. Bye-bye.
Yep.